Welcome, everyone. We're currently populating the chat from the Zoom room from our waiting room. All right, it looks like we're up to about 30 participants at 7 o'clock. 7:01 now, it looks like it's clicked over to. So Mike, would you start the YouTube recording for us? Or sorry, the Zoom recording for us? Looks like we are recording. Okay, so with that, I will welcome everyone to the 2020 Alevinhain Town Council Encinitas Mayoral Candidate Forum. This is a biennial candidate forum sponsored by the Alevinhain Town Council. Alevinhain Town Council is a organization back in Alevinhain that preserves and protects the historical properties of the Alevinhain Meeting Hall, the Hotel Germania, and the shanty on the property. It is an open group that's membership is open to all members of the Alevinhain community. Membership is available through the alevinhain.org website. Mark, can you post to chat, please, the way that folks could get involved or learn more about the Alevinhain Town Council?
Sure.
And with that, I'd like to introduce the two candidates for mayor, who are probably much better known than I am, but our incumbent mayor, Catherine Blakespeare.
Hello, thank you. Thanks for having me today.
Thank you. And the challenger, Julie Thunder.
Hi, Dan, and hello to everybody out there.
Thank you. So as you guys registered for this Zoom candidates forum, you were able to produce questions that were of interest to you. And so we've gone through those very many questions, probably over 70 questions that came in, and broke them down into two main topics that seem to be of most interest or most relevance to the community. And so we'll start with a topic of community character, and specifically the community of Alevinhain, and issues that are very specific to Alevinhain. These aren't necessarily the most popular topics that came through on the survey, but we believe that with the many mayoral forums that are out there and available, we have a special responsibility to highlight those issues that are of utmost importance or very parochial to Alevinhain. The second issue is the one that dominated our questions in the inbox, and that deals with sort of land use policy, the housing element, and in particular, the R30 development project proposed behind the 7-Eleven site. And then at the end, we're going to save some time for at least one audience-derived question and closing statements from the candidates. Just a little bit of logistical background before we get started. The first 7 questions that get asked were sort of preset by the town council, and those have been shared with the candidates ahead of time, along with the time that they have to respond to those. And so we did that with the interest of being able to have well thought out answers that optimize the time that we have available. The candidates have each been requested not to speak about each other's positions, but to focus on the facts and their particular ideas and positions. As an audience, you're all muted, and you'll remain muted for the formal 1 hour of the forum. But audience participation is really important to us. It's one of the real hallmarks of the biennial in-person candidate forums that we've had over the years. And so we've tried to figure out as many ways as possible to get you guys involved in the conversation. So one of the things we're doing is that the chat is open to everyone. It'll be monitored by our Vice President, Mark Mayer. And as there are questions that require clarification from the candidates, something that maybe is being misunderstood or what they really said or meant was controversial in the chat, he'll have the opportunity to make himself apparent to me, and I'll call on him to ask a clarifying question as necessary. At the end of the forum, as we get into the concluding phase, he'll also synthesize at least one question from the audience for the candidates. In addition, after the formal conclusion to the session at hopefully 8 o'clock, we will turn off the live streaming and the recording, and we'll have sort of an informal milling around session. That'll be an opportunity for the audience to raise their hand and be recognized with the mic, and an opportunity for the candidates to take some time to interact with the audience through the chat function, etc. We also have some fairly strict time regiments in place. And so our Timekeeper, Jennifer, who's in the bottom of the screen here, at 15 seconds of winding down for the candidate's time, will raise a yellow card warning them that the time is almost up. At 5 seconds, it'll start to flash. And then when time is up, it'll turn to a red stop sign. Candidates have been asked to just complete their sentence at that point and honor the time commitments so that we can get the most time into the 1 hour that we've scheduled for this as practical. With that, and no further babble from me, let's move to the first question of the session. And in particular, the community of Encinitas was formed, I believe, 34 years ago by the 5 sort of historic communities of Encinitas. And my question for the candidates is, how committed are you to preserving the character of our 5 communities? And what about Olievenhain's character in particular are you most interested in preserving? As the incumbent, Catherine, I invite you to go first, and you have 90 seconds.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you for having me here today. I know there are 2 different forums you could be watching tonight, so I'm honored that you're watching ours. Community character is foundational for our city. All of our communities have distinct community character, and Olievenhain is one that has a great number of positive adjectives that we could attach to it. So some of them that I think apply are rustic, bucolic, pastoral, rural, historic, committed to the outdoors, horse-loving, trail appreciating. I have been your mayor for 4 years and was on the city council for 2 years before that. And so I've demonstrated my commitment to your community character. I embrace it, and I'm working not just to preserve it, but also to enhance it. And one of the ways that we're doing that is by investing in the trail network, because I know that that's a really important part of the Olievenhain community character. So most notably along Rancho Santa Fe Road, we have close to $1 million trail that's called Trail 82 that's currently in design. We also have a trail along Manchester, which is almost a $2 million trail. And then we have a much shorter section of trail called Trail 95 along El Camino del Norte. And all of those enhancements are part of what make Olievenhain a great place to be. And I want to make sure that we are able to continue to have that as part of the community character in Olievenhain. And I thank you for having me here tonight.
Great, thank you. And Julie, you also have 90 seconds. Please go ahead. Julie, you're muted. We won't start the timer until you're unmuted. Julie, can you unmute yourself?
Is that better?
That is much better.
I'm so
All
sorry.
right, so now you have 90 seconds starting now. Thank you.
Okay, starting over. Hi, everybody, and thanks again for coming tonight. When Encinitas was incorporated in 1986, it was for the precise reason to develop a community identity and to gain local control of land use. In fact, the term community character is cited 19 times throughout our general plan. I'm fully committed to preserving each of our communities' uniqueness. It's the very first item on my website, a slideshow of the 5 communities in which the Olievenhain slide states, my mission to, quote, keep Olievenhain rural. I love history, And it's important to me that buildings like the town hall be kept in their original state and protected from harm. Olivenhain also represents a way of life with quieter neighborhoods, less sounds from car traffic, dark skies. These are some of the very qualities that attracted most of you to live there. They deserve our protection, and you have the right to that protection. There is nowhere else in our city or our neighboring cities that you can see a horse cruise by and hear chickens and goats, all while driving your kids to soccer practice. I've done it many times. And for the record, I still miss the cows grazing just to the north. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. Thank you both. So Olivenhain serves physically as something of a wildland urban interface for the city of Encinitas. And with that, the fire danger is real to our community. All of those of us that were in here in 2007 remember being evacuated and the fires that stopped at the Bridges golf course. We've formed an Olivenhain Fire Safe Council in order to, and that's a partnership between the town council and the fire chief. And we've done that in order to try to raise awareness of fuel dangers, safe spaces, evacuation routes, etc. We have a couple of directors from the Fire Safe Council on the line tonight. And so I ask in the chat, maybe one of you guys could provide contact information for audience members that would like to get involved with Fire Safe Council or be on their mailing list, how to do that. And the issue is very real to our community. We have a number of folks who are losing their homeowners insurance because of the fire danger. There's a major fuel issue in the old Lake Valsereno basin it's a threat to the neighborhood. And the fire safety evacuation plan is challenging for our neighborhood. So the question I have for each of you is, how, as mayor, will you protect the citizens of Olivenhain from a paradise-like wildfire disaster? And we'll rotate orders of response throughout the evening. So this time it'll be Julie, and you have 90 seconds.
Well, I'm so glad to hear you mention the Fire Safe Council. I only recently learned about it, and I'm looking forward to learning more. The extreme vulnerability of Olivenhain and all of its residents and their animals is of great concern to me. I'm ready to work for a permanent, fully staffed, 3-man fire station with a more substantial fire truck. With Lone Jack and Rancho Santa Fe Road being the only in and out for thousands of people, it's imperative that this happen and that it happen quickly. Also, the shamefully overgrown Escondido Creek near Valsereno, as you mentioned, Dan, has become a huge problem due to neglect, and it must be addressed. What used to be a private man-made lake along Escondido Creek has been allowed to infill with non-native plants and dead underbrush that will burst into flames. It's not a question of if, but when. This fire hazard wraps around a dense community with only one way in and out, and is most certainly life-threatening to the people who live there. It's a mystery to me that the city of Encinitas and the county aren't addressing this right now, especially after watching the recent fires throughout the West. Thank you.
And with that, Catherine, it's your 90 seconds.
Okay, thank you. So I've been in a local elected office here in Encinitas for 6 years, and every year I worry and think about and plan for wildfire, because there's no question that it is a threat to our community. And before COVID hit, just right before it hit, I did a tour through Olivenhain with our fire chief to see all of the preparation that goes into protecting our community. I think that we all know some of the things that are really important to do to have a plan, especially for large animals, and to prepare. So even in my house, we have a go bag, and we prepare to leave when we have Santa Ana conditions like we do right now. The months of September, October, November are particularly scary because we see fires all throughout the state. We see them in our county, and we're just always keeping a vigilant eye on the rest of our community to make sure that we stay safe. I was on the council that invested in creating the fire station in Olevenhain about 5 years ago, making it permanent, because before that it had not been permanent and had been staffed on overtime. So I'm really happy that we have that, that commitment to the community now. And I've also been endorsed by the Encinitas Firefighters Association because of my commitment to public safety and to our firefighters, making sure that they're well funded, making sure that our community is as safe as possible, that evacuation routes are prepared in advance, and that we can do everything possible to make sure that our community stays safe.
Awesome. I want to thank you guys both for doing a great job of the timing. So our third and final question, preset question for the Olevenhain section, deals with Rancho Santa Fe Road traffic, and especially the peak rush hour traffic congestion and the safety of the thoroughfare. In fact, we've had more questions about that than any other Olevenhain specific topic. And as I believe you both know, Olevenhain Town Council and Councilman Mosca partnered shortly after the last election cycle on a Rancho Santa Fe Road task force. And that has the ambitious goal of building community consensus about what we can best do to address the congestion and safety issues along Rancho Santa Fe Road. Indeed, we had a relatively contentious meeting this morning. I think, as both of you would probably acknowledge, building consensus around a controversial issue is challenging. However, our goal and our commitment is to build that consensus within the Olevenhain community, and we're hoping to be able to do that by early next year. So my question for each of you is, as mayor, will you support funding consensus improvements to Rancho Santa Fe Road that our community requests? And given our fiscal constraints as a city, what would you not fund to be able to make this investment? And we're back to Catherine, and you have 90 seconds.
Well, thank you. I would absolutely commit to funding those consensus improvements. I think what you've described, working with Councilmember Mosca, having the city engineers involved at the beginning, working to build community consensus, is the epitome of the right process, the bottom-up approach to coming up with something that everybody or most people can agree is a community good. So you're trying to tackle traffic congestion and safety concerns. And I think there can be competing goals in terms of making it either faster to get through the corridor or less fast to get through the corridor, and how you approach that when it comes to stop signs and other improvements. I would say that if there is a consensus plan that can come out of this, it would immediately become a top tier funding priority, because we would like to improve all sections of our community in ways that the community wants. And we see those things happening, like in Leucadia. Leucadia Streetscape is an example of a project that made its way through that same process. And we are still now in the process of building it. And this is something I think that would truthfully be more modest than Leucadia Streetscape. And I think we've already made some improvements, like increasing the turn pockets when you're headed onto Rancho Santa Fe Road. The left turn now, the signaling is changed so that it allows more cars to get through in a more efficient way. So I absolutely commit to this. I think it's great that you're doing it, and I'm eager to follow the progress as it goes, and I support you all the way. Thank you.
Very good. And Julie, you now have 90 seconds.
Thank you. Dan, I wasn't aware that the Rancho Santa Fe Task Force has come to a conclusion about how best to upgrade Rancho Santa Fe Road. I've seen the survey, but haven't seen any conclusions. So I look forward to seeing those soon. If the consensus for improvements are a true reflection of the majority of people in Olevenhain, and the rural community character can be preserved, then yes, I would support it 100%. I think what you guys are doing is what I wish all of our other communities were doing. You're organized, you're taking ownership of the problem, and you're actually executing to find solutions. I love that. I'm curious to see if the majority of people want traffic circles or stoplights, sidewalks, and curb and gutter, but please don't block the horse trails alongside the road. I like those. And by the way, I would dial back, or I've already spoken out that I'm interested in dialing back the current council streetscape plan. It's just too much at 55 million for 2 miles of road. And so hopefully if we get a majority and we're able to dial that back to a reasonable project, then it would make more sense then it would make it more easy to move forward with your plan. Thanks. Sorry.
Okay, very good. Thank you much. So Catherine, you did not note what you would unfund in order to make the funding available for the Liebenhain improvements. Very briefly, can you mention one or two things that might be targets for the extra funding?
Well, first of all, I want to say that Leucadia Streetscape, we do not know that its cost is 55 million because it has actually not been costed. It has not even been fully designed. And also, we will probably receive grants for that. The El Portal undercrossing, we received a $4 million grant for that undercrossing. So utilizing our local money to get state money is one of the key the key ways that we build infrastructure improvements. So I don't know, I don't think we would have to defund anything. I mean, the reality is that when there's a project that comes forward and it's supported by the community and it's something that we can either work into our ongoing budget, which is kind of more of the maintenance side, or if it's a little bit larger, it goes onto the CIP, capital improvement budget, then those things can happen. I mean, luckily, we're an extremely well-run city. So we have money to invest into capital improvement projects. We do it every year, and we're still able to fund our law enforcement and to be a clean and safe city. So I don't anticipate we would be defunding anything to be able to do this.
Okay. And I note that you didn't specifically mention anything and use the opportunity as a bit of a rebuttal to Julie's comments. So I'm going to give Julie a brief opportunity for a counter rebuttal out of fairness. Julie?
Well, real quickly, the 55 million comes from the city. We've done records request, and what we do when we ask for the cost is we look at the total overall cost, including all the consulting that's been done to date. So there, when a city plans a project, of course they have a projected cost. So when you take their projected estimate and you add the consulting fees done to date, which are very high, you're up to 55 million, which is over $25 million per mile. So that's why I'm interested in dialing it back. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Julie. Okay, so with that, we've introduced what I think is a relatively unusual format for the mayoral forums. And we're inviting the candidates to each ask a question of their opponent. And so the first opportunity here will be for Julie to ask a question of Catherine. You have 30 seconds to ask a question. After which, Catherine will have 90 seconds uninterrupted to answer your question. Julie, please go ahead with your question.
And yes, you're right. We have not done this together before. So way to blaze a new trail there, Dan. So Catherine, my question is, staying on the topic of character, you've said that it's, quote, just and fair that Liebenhain take its fair share of affordable units. Can you explain what is just and fair about the Liebenhain or about the Goodson project?
Okay, and Catherine, you have 90 seconds to respond to that question.
Well, the Goodson project is not a project that I support or that I promoted. Liebenhain has one site on the housing element update. And my opponent loves to say that we should be scattering these around and not having just 15 sites. But state law requires that they be at least half an acre in size. And we had to find property under state law that was vacant and there was owner interest. So that made the available land in the city of Encinitas difficult to find. So this project is not something that has been finalized. It was also a bit of a bait and switch by the developer who was proposing about 140 senior living apartments and then changed that and is doing another project now. But it has not been completed and submitted, so the details aren't final. And there's no way for me to really comment on what I think about that project in advance of it. I will say that I support projects that protect community character. I have no history of approving large housing projects in this city. Since I've been in local elected office, we haven't approved any. And if you look at my record, just last month, we actually denied a project for a hotel and a timeshare project that was on La Costa Avenue. So in no way am I a pro-development candidate or interested in ruining community character or overdeveloping our city. I am very much interested in having projects that fit into our community's character. And one of the ways to do that is through granny flats. So that's an important part of our housing stock as well.
Okay, very good. So that was the maiden voyage for a candidate asking a candidate question. And Catherine, this time it's your chance to ask a question back of Julie. You have 30 seconds to ask a question of Julie.
Okay, thank you. So who a local candidate supports for United States president is a reflection on their approach to issues that are simultaneously both national and local, like climate change, solutions for homelessness, poverty, and the commitment to a diverse and egalitarian society. Given that you were a lifelong Republican and are supported by Republican interests until a month before you declared for mayor, and you told many people of your support for Trump in 2016, who are you supporting for the next president of the United States?
All right. Julie, before you answer on your time clock, there was a given that sentence in there. And so I'm going to want to hear in your own words, what is your history of registration with political parties? What is your current registration, and how do you see yourself as aligned with a political party?
I've been a Republican for most of my life. I've always called myself a Ronnie Reagan Republican. I have lost interest in the party long ago. When I looked into running for mayor, I realized that one of the problems in Encinitas is this heavily partisan politics that we're playing in Encinitas. So I became an independent because I did not want to run for office and be influenced by a political party. I think Encinitas has had enough partisan politics, and I want to be part of a movement that brings us back to the center.
Okay, Julie, I appreciate that. I note that the response was a little bit beyond what I'd asked. You've been very quick on your times so far, so I'm not going to penalize you for that, but I would like to caution you.
Don't I get to answer the question?
You will, yes. I'm about to start your 90-second clock, and what was going through my head was, should I shorten the clock? But given that you finished your time frame ahead of time, pretty much every time we've clocked it, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to invite you to answer Catherine's question for the full 90 seconds that's available to you. Please start now.
Thank you. I have never, ever, vocally or publicly spoken out in support of, frankly, any president. I'm not like that. And I never have spoken out publicly or to anybody about support for this particular president, because I wouldn't do that. I don't understand the huge push to try to throw me into a corner that I'm not in. The only thing I can see is it's a political move because they don't have much to use against me. So I would like Encinitas, the people who are so hateful of our president, and I understand that hate, but please don't judge a candidate on if they share your exact level of hate. There are plenty of things wrong right now, and they're happening in our own city. Let's get our city on the right track. Let's not make this about national politics, and let's not make this about partisan plays.
Okay, great, thank you. So with that, we'll conclude the Olivenhain specific topic session for the evening, and we'll move to something even more controversial. So the housing element, land use issues, and in particular, the Goodson project behind the 7-Eleven are the questions that dominated the questions that was asked by our audience. So I'm going to walk through these a little bit chronologically. I have several questions, and as you guys have both seen. So the fifth cycle housing element was approved despite the voters rejecting essentially the same housing element at the ballot. As it's proven, as it's proving, I guess, because it's a work in progress, but based on the projects that have been submitted and are in various stages of review by the planning department, it's fairly clear that the developers intend to build more units than was planned for or analyzed in the environmental analysis, and they will yield fewer, quote, affordable units. And when we say affordable in that context, what we're really talking about is affordable to a family of four making $92,000 a year. So with that, my first question for each of you is, do you believe it is possible to adopt a legally compliant housing element that passes a majority vote as required by Prop A? And I ask you to each answer this first with a yes or no, and then explain why or why not. Julie, you can go first. 60 seconds.
Absolutely, yes. There were many amazing ideas given to the council and that housing task force. Most of them were ignored. The council complained about Prop A, saying developers couldn't build with the constraints that Prop A brings. I say it wasn't Prop A that was the problem, it was the overblown plans that included Prop A killer clauses in them that were the problem. Escondido has a similar Prop S, and they have a compliant housing plan. For state projects, they don't cater to developers' whims and wishes, they listen to the people. The developers still make money off the projects if they want to participate, but they have to play by Escondido's rules. The city gets more needed affordable housing, and the nearby residents don't feel overrun by mega developments. By reversing our Measure U vote and setting aside Prop A to pass the housing plan, this council picked winners and losers. The winners are the developers and landowners who instantly made millions of dollars. The losers are the people who are stuck living near the projects.
Okay, thank you, Julie. And Catherine, you have 60 seconds for the same question. Please start with a yes or no answer.
Well, yes, I do think that it's possible for the voters to pass a plan for more affordable housing. I think that I'm fundamentally an optimistic person. I believe that our community does want to provide places for families of four who make $92,000 to live in our city, because that is firefighters and nurses and teachers and service workers and a lot of people. So we need to provide those opportunities in the city. I think that the notion that this is somehow easy, or that there were all these great ideas and we just threw them out, is it's naive, and it's actually insulting, because the reality is there are a lot of smart people and we are working underneath these very onerous state laws. And I don't support these state laws, but I live in the real world. I work as an attorney. I recognize the importance of having a city that's compliant with laws while we're also protecting community character. So I believe we can do all those things. And I hope to work to do those things. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, guys. Again, I'd like to express my gratitude for you guys both respecting these time limits. It makes my job much easier. All right. So when the city council voted to include the Olivenhain site on the housing element, that site was not eligible for by right development. As I believe you both know, by right development allows the developer to bypass discretionary city review of the project and CEQA compliance statutes. In September of last year, the city changed underlying Encinitas Municipal Code, which switched that project from requiring CEQA and discretionary review to being able to bypass those. Encinitas Residents for Responsible Development, or RRD, has filed a timely lawsuit challenging this process. In the interest of full disclosure, I am both a co-founder and leader of the Encinitas RRD group. And the question is, as mayor, would you settle with Encinitas RRD and not process any lot line adjustments under the new ordinance until a proper environmental review has been completed? And again, as with the last question, I ask you to first answer yes or no, and then explain your reasoning. And Catherine, you're first this time, 60 seconds.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Dan, for disclosing your interest also as a party to that lawsuit. I cannot possibly weigh in on an answer to that because we are in active litigation. So what I can say is that the rule of law is really important. It is the core of good governance. You don't want to have favoritism and bias. You want your city to follow the law. So we are trying to do that while also providing the opportunities for affordable housing, while also protecting your right to vote and being engaged in an ongoing community conversation about how to achieve that. So the city is not in a position right now for me to be commenting on active litigation, and it would be frankly irresponsible for me to do that. So I apologize that I am not able to answer that, but if my opponent answers it, she would have to recuse herself from that litigation if she were to be elected, because you will have already stated a position and you're not allowed to do that. So I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
And with that, Julie, you have 60 seconds to answer the same question.
Well, that is tough to answer considering I haven't been briefed by your attorney, nor is the city willing to brief residents about its plans for a legal defense. I did suspect that this was about the city's newly enacted lot consolidation law. This new law was implemented in a very sneaky, non-transparent way. The planning department processed a seemingly benign change to our municipal code that ultimately allowed Goodson, or any developer who wants to join together two lots, to avoid an environmental impact report. This law was slipped in without an honest and open explanation to the public or the planning commissioners as to what the true ramifications would be. I'm in full support of reversing this lot consolidation decision, and any large project absolutely needs a full environmental impact report. I'm also in support of shining daylight on the way our city does business, which seems to favor outside interests over residents' property values.
Very good, thank you. So I'd like to move a little bit from the 5th cycle to the 6th cycle. So as you both are fully aware, the city is now on the hook for coming up with a 6th cycle because we did the 5th cycle so late in its period. And recently, the state HCD has come back with comments on our initial proposal for a 6th cycle housing element. And they've made clear that the 5th cycle upzoning has produced far fewer affordable housing units, even under the guise that $92,000 a year for a family of 4 is affordable. It's providing only a handful of units that would be affordable to, say, a family making $50,000 a year. At the same time, it's providing more market rate units than were planned for in the environmental analysis. Question for each of you is, as mayor, how do you propose to satisfy the requirements for the 6th cycle housing element, particularly to provide no net loss housing capacity? That is, what new sites are you guys going to find in order to find new housing within Encinitas, and to build meaningful housing for families making $50,000 or yet less? This is a particularly substantive question, and so you have 2 minutes to respond. Julie, you have the first chance.
Well, part of this is a problem with these new state laws, as you know, as in the no net loss laws that are now on the books. It's just more of our state pushing unfunded mandates onto cities. This is very important to understand. Years ago, the state provided funding for cities to build lower income housing. As you know, that funding dried up. Now we have politically motivated, building industry financed legislators trying to take over our land use by forcing us to build high density housing. They say it's because we need more affordable housing. But if that's so, why did the state's HCD approve our housing element, which has a very low percentage of affordable housing? And that affordable housing will never get us to the numbers of affordable units required. So why is Goodson allowed to drop his affordable count from 149 to 42? There's something wrong with all of that. And so this isn't about affordable housing. It's about high density housing and lining the pockets of developers, like the developers in Encinitas who were made millionaires with this improper upzoning done by Measure U. Several of them have poured tens of thousands of dollars into this local election. There are no developers on my donations list, and I don't have a PAC supporting me. I propose, when I'm mayor, that we join the cities already working with Livable California. Right now, they are forming coalitions to resist the state's constant attempts to take over our land use decisions. And it's working. They're successfully defeating many of the extreme bills the legislature just tried to pass. There's only one candidate for mayor proposing we join the cities to fight back. In the meantime, I will always vote to accept the minimum units required by the state to satisfy the state. And I will always vote to expect the maximum percentage of affordable units be built with each project. Thank you.
Thank you. And Catherine, you also have 2 minutes for the same question.
Okay, thank you. You know, this allegation that developers are supporting me and that somehow my opponent doesn't have anything like that is just a complete fiction and a lie. So her family business is called Thunder Jones Commercial Structural Concrete. That is how she lives in Encinitas, is from commercial structural concrete. So there is clearly a connection to the development community there. And the city of Encinitas is not in, we are in no way a pro-development, pro-housing city with a pro-development mayor. Like I said before, I cannot remember any of big housing developments that I have approved or that we have had come before us in the city of Encinitas. But we are trying to do what is required. So we need to comply with state laws. We need to provide more affordable housing. We need to protect community character. And all of those things together are what it means to be actually in the arena, figuring out how to problem solve, how to do it in the best way possible, how to make a plan that the community can support. So one of the things that I was all in on and continue to be is accessory dwelling units, because that's a way for us to scatter homes into existing neighborhoods in a way that does not have as much of an impact on our communities. And it also gives the value to the landowner, not to the developer. And so having an approach that's really systematic, that goes after this, that applies it, that says, let's make this something that we're known for. We've more than tripled the number of accessory dwelling units or granny flats in the city. Waived off, provided plans for free. This is something that takes leadership. And so finding those solutions of things, how can we add housing in a way that works in our city, is something that I am working on all the time. I care deeply about your community character. I care about the community character of the whole city. And I want to support that while also complying with the law.
All right. And along the lines of each of you speaking for each other, I'm just going to ask for a couple of little clarifications because you guys are starting to dance into that area of speaking for each other. Julie, what is your family business, and is it part of the construction industry?
Absolutely. I'm very proud of my husband and what our best friend from college at San Diego State have built. They built Thunder Jones Contracting Group. They build structural concrete. The name of the company was wrong. It's Thunder Jones Contracting Group. They are not developers. The word developer is not in there. Neither one of them are financial guys. They're not land investors. They do concrete jobs. They build parking garages and foundations. They used to do driveways when they were starting out for years, but they're not part of developers. They're the guys that come in on a subcontract. All of their jobs are subcontracts, just like the plumbers, just like the framers, just like the flooring guys. They come in and do their part and they get out. Why was it a brilliant move? I'll tell you, because the guys that do the concrete get paid first. It's worked out very well for us, and I'm very proud of how our sacrifice has paid off. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. And Catherine, along the same lines, Julie asserted that you're supported by political action committees, supported by the building industry. I assume she's talking about folks like Marco Gonzalez and YIMBY supporters, et cetera. Can you speak a little bit to the credibility of that assertion?
Yeah. So I have a broad range of supporters. There are more than 800 people who have supported my campaign. And the system involves having these PACs that support candidates. And there are PACs that support my opponent, for example, Citizens for a Better East County, $10,000. You know, what is that? Citizens for a Better East County. So the people who are supporting me are local people, like you just mentioned. Marco Gonzalez is a local attorney, and people want stability. I think everybody, residents, businesses, they want to understand that the person at the helm is invested in making our community better, is going to follow the rule of law, and is somebody that is reasonable and applying things across the board. I have demonstrated myself to be that, and my opponent has not. So I think there is a fear that what the city would do and what direction it would go is not something that would be for the benefit of most people in the city. And so those are the people who support me. It's a broad range. It does include some people in the development community, like an architect. In the same way, I mean, obviously development leads to needing to hire a concrete contractor. So there's just no difference between saying, oh, I'm not a developer, I'm just a sub. Because all of these types of professions, there's a broad range of professions that benefit from development. Concrete, just like any other part of the construction field, is one of those.
Thank you. All right, we have a fourth and final question on this topic. So Encinitas Affordable Housing Advocates, including Keys for Homes, St. Andrew's Faith in Action, and Encinitas RRD, believe that to build housing accessible to people with very low incomes and below, that's 50K or below, it is critical to build projects where the city has site control. Site control in this case means either they own the property or they have a partnership covenant with a development partner who does. These are the projects that are most compatible with outside funding sources to subsidize the housing. And these organizations believe that this is the best way to break the R30 buy right, no net loss cycle that builds 6 market rate units for every affordable one. So my question to each of you is, will you pledge not to vote to upzone additional high density lots unless the city has site control, either by deed or covenant? Please answer yes or no and explain why or why not. This is a 60-second question, and Catherine, you're up first.
Well, the city is not in the position of having site control right now. So the city right now zones and the private market builds. That's how it has worked historically in Encinitas and in many communities. Some communities built or bought properties like San Marcos. They own a lot of properties that they can enter into these partnerships to do affordable housing projects. If we have community will to move forward with that type of a strategy, I would love to do that. It's the kind of thing that would need financing. So projects that are 100% affordable, they have tax incentives, they have subsidies, they have partnerships with local governments and also with the state government for certain types of projects and grants. So it's the kind of thing that we could do if we have a community will to do that. I am not sure if that's the case, but I would love to pursue all options.
All right, and so I'm just going to ask a clarification on that. You answered a little bit early, so hopefully it doesn't throw us behind a little bit. A, you didn't actually start with a yes or no, and B, through your conversation, the city does own properties like L7 and Pacific View. The county owns the Burns site. The transit district owns property along the train tracks that Tony's been talking about. So there are some theoretical, at least, possibilities for site control properties. Can you give us a yes or no and maybe address the viability of some of those sites?
Yeah, I mean, one site that people bring up all the time is the Public Works Yard on Encinitas Boulevard, which is right next to the freeway. But the reality is that site is utilized and it's an industrial use. So there is heavy equipment stored there. There are workers. It starts very early in the morning. My opponent loves to say, oh, that's a great place to put it. And I've heard that from people all across the board. But when you actually look into it and see what's happening on that site, it is a heavily utilized city property for an industrial use, which is not compatible with adding housing onto it. We could we could buy properties. We could potentially invest with North County Transit District. I think that's a great idea. And that would also be near the train station. And then the burn site is something that we have been talking with the county about. It's a toxic waste dump. I mean, it would need to be cleaned up and somebody would need to finance that. But those are all opportunities that we should consider in the future. Absolutely.
All right. I still don't know yes or
Okay,
no. Do you want to give me a quick yes or no?
Yeah, the answer is no, because that's
Okay.
not feasible. It's not feasible. You can't, I don't
Okay.
think you could legitimately, honestly claim and say yes. I wouldn't believe you if someone said that.
Very good. All right. So Julie, the same question. Will you pledge to not to vote to upside on high density lots unless the city has site control, either by deed or covenant? Please answer yes or no and explain why or why not. We'll give you a little bit more than 60 seconds if you need it.
Yes, as much as I can, because I believe you're onto something there. And that's exactly what we've been saying, the other challenger candidates and myself. I can't imagine any scenario that I would vote for more R30 where an outside developer sets at the controls. The city of Encinitas owns plenty of land that could be used to build 100% affordable housing in reasonable sized projects that won't overwhelm the immediate area. We should, in addition, the projects that are there, and while we're trying to do this great idea that you bring up, Dan, and if we have to zone up again, we should have a requirement that on the R30 zones, that they be 25 to 50% lower income instead of the 15 that's now being offered to developers. The city's own housing attorney, Barbara Kauts, K-A-U-T-S, said that it's fairly common to have a significantly higher inclusionary requirement on these, but her comments were forgotten. So absolutely, there's a company, I'm absolutely all for the city doing its own affordable housing. There's a company called Chelsea Homes, and there's several like it that do exactly this in the city of San Diego. They're experts at finding the funding. All the city has to do is come up with the land. And by the way, they have a really good record. Most of them, as far as I have a good record, of running 100% lower income apartment complexes that are nice. They're not, we have a nice one on Vulcan called Iris Apartments. It's really nice. It's small, there's no impact. I've driven through it many times trying to check it out and see if that's something I can envision for Encinitas. So I'm hopeful in that. And I would rather spend money on lots to get through this process than that 55 million for streetscape.
Awesome, thank you. All right, before we transition to the second round of asking candidate questions, you might have seen a poll pop up in front of you. That's part of our effort to get the audience involved in asking a question. And so for the audience, if you get a chance to answer that poll, that'll be part of the next section after this topic concludes. For everybody that's trying to actually speak, you can just clear the poll out of your window and we'll get through it. Okay, and so for the second round of questions, Catherine, it's your chance to ask Julia an opening salvo. Again, you'll have 30 seconds to answer a question for her to have 90 seconds to respond to.
Okay, thank you. Every time you've been involved in the community, it seems like you're against something. So for example, against the coastal rail trail, founding no rail trail, against streetscape, against the homeless parking lot. Encinitas hasn't seen you involved in proactive community projects, like being on a commission or on one of our community or business organizations. Can you point to any positive initiatives that you have been involved in here in the city of Encinitas?
Well, to start, I wouldn't be chosen for a commission. Your partisan politics has been in control of the council for quite some time, and you pull up people who are who only think alike like you do. So there's a lot of people who've been shut out. I mean, if Kurt Grosclose can't be appointed to the planning commission, we have a problem. Look at the person that was up against Kelly Hinsey for city council. There's definitely a machine here, folks, that's bringing people into the city, into the commissions, and into the council because of their partisan politics. That's what I want to break. As far as opposing projects, if it's a bad project, you're right, I oppose them. The rail trail was a terrible project. In fact, you opposed it also, Catherine. You went to California Coastal Commission with us to fight for putting it on the west side, which was our position. So it really gets tiresome having you point that out to me all the time. And finally, the rail trail would never have been opposed if it wouldn't have destroyed the last piece of open space in Cardiff along this section. It also destroyed beach access for an entire community, for thousands of people. Now, we have our access back. Why? Because the fence is all torn down and people bust the gates every time. So it looks like a ghetto down here. By the way, the mayor and I both access the beach that way. She crosses the tracks through the broken gates just like I do. How ridiculous is that? That was a bad project. They should have waited until we could build a safe crossing. Thank you.
Okay. Along those lines, I'll note that Julie did put a few words in your mouth, Catherine. Did you oppose the rail trail at the Coastal Commission hearing? And do you access the beach via the railroad access, the torn down fences, so to speak?
Well, first of all, I'd like to note that my question was, have you been involved in anything positive? And you listed a whole bunch of negative things. Negative on the commissions, negative on the rail trail. I mean, it's just a whole line of negativity, no solutions, no positive vision, no pride in our city. I mean, that is the platform that you offer to the city as the mayor. And I just find that to be something that is very distasteful, because I want to hear from people what it is that they would see that would be positive that they would accomplish in the city, not just tearing down and throwing stones and thinking that there's some other magical thing that's going to happen. So to your question, I was always in favor of a rail trail. I mean, my opponent was not. Her group was called No Rail Trail. Where the rail trail was what was at issue at the Coastal Commission. But when the Coastal Commission denied it, I was immediately, okay, let's build it. And my opponent was the one who was saying, let's put this at the back of the line, make sure this doesn't get funded. There was even a supporter of hers who said, we're going to be on your doorstep forever if you approve this, with this threatening language, which was a core group of her inner supporters on No Rail Trail. So yes, I mean, there's no question that our view on the rail trail is completely different, and that I support a rail trail. I support all of the community improvements that we're doing in the city. My opponent is opposed to every single one of them.
All right. And the point about accessing the beach over the fallen down fences?
I do not do that right now. I have done that. I do not do it right now.
All right. That sounds a little bit like some Bill Clinton era questions on marijuana smoking.
No, it's completely true.
It's fine. It's all good.
I'm sorry.
So Julie, I heard Catherine both make some counterpoints ahead of this, and then also add a little bit in on you've never supported the rail trail in any way. Would you like to take say 15, 20 seconds to respond to her rebuttal?
Or more. That was a lot more than 15 or 20 seconds, I will say. And I say with a smile on my face, we supported the rail trail to be built on the west side from the beginning. We tried and we tried and we tried, but they had a mission. And by the way, I'm running a campaign. Sorry, folks, but my job is not to celebrate projects that the current mayor is building. My job is to point out what's wrong with them so that we can switch the politics of our city. So it's keep going. She can keep going with that line of complaints.
Right. So let's move on. Julie, you get an opportunity now to ask Catherine a question. 30 seconds to ask her a question.
Okay. Why did you change the lawsuit, the lawsuit that you put against residents to invalidate Prop A? Why did you change it from being against the residents to being against the state of California?
Are you ready for me to?
Oh, yes, please go ahead. I think, Catherine, your internet might be a little weak.
Are you? Yeah.
Yes, please go ahead when you're ready.
Okay, I want to make sure you can hear my answer. Will you give me a thumbs up? Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. Yeah, so the group Preserve Prop A was asking to sit at the table and make their best argument. they had tried to intervene, filed legal documents that said, we want to be in the middle of the lawsuits that are going on related to Prop A. And so we said, okay, great. Come and sit at the table and make your best argument. Their attorney clearly said that on multiple occasions. And then when we invited them to the table, they turned around and said, this is not what we want. This is your job, or I don't know what they were saying. They were saying, we don't want to be here anymore. So we said, okay, our actual dispute is with the state. So we will change the defendant to be the state. And then what happened? Preserve Prop A filed a motion to intervene to yet be a defendant again, which it just blows your mind when you think about the fact that that's what's happened, is that that group now wants to be involved in the exact same position as a defendant that we had named them in. So that it's a long and complex history, and it's not something that that is the way things should go. I'm hopeful that we can get ourselves through these lawsuits with the state and through the uncertainty around how does state law preempt local law? In what circumstances is that the case, so that we can go back to having our right to vote in any circumstance where it's possible? Like one of your first questions was about, could we come up with something that would pass Prop A? I think we could, and to put all this behind us. But that's an explanation of what happened that resulted in the different defendants and who is the current defendant.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So with that, I'll conclude the topic on housing and land use. And I note that we've hit 8 o'clock. And I think we're going to need to go about 15 minutes beyond in order to get at least one audience question that we've promised, and the concluding comments from the two candidates. So with that, I'll ask our Vice President, Mark Mayer, to unmute himself. Mark,
right,
can you ask us a question for the candidates from the audience?
Sure. Taking a look at the poll, the overwhelming question was, is there a way to increase the number of affordable housing units in the Goodson project and reduce the overall units to make it reasonable for the neighborhood?
Okay, and so for this question, it's Catherine's time to go first. 90 seconds to address the audience's question.
Yes, so I would love to have as many affordable units as possible. What he is using, it's 20% affordability, and that's a state law carve out. And we are in the process of raising our inclusionary ordinance to be 20% wherever feasible. So I want as much affordable housing out of every project as everybody else does. I mean, there's no reason for us not to have that. We had to provide the studies that would support it, because we cannot have a high inclusionary number, higher than 20% affordability requirement, without outside studies that show that the project doesn't become infeasible. And these are all state laws. So we're working under this very onerous system of the state laws. And ideally, we would get a higher percentage. The way development works is that the city, unless it's our project, doesn't define the project. The developer defines the project, and then the city makes sure that every single rule is followed. And we're very committed to that. We cross every T and dot every I. You'll notice that Goodson had to do another CPP. He did not want to do that. We actually received lawyer letters saying, we're going to sue you, city, over your requirement to do another CPP. But we stuck by that. We required it. I mean, we are in no way trying to facilitate this project or bend over backwards or make it easier for him or anything. But at the end of the day, it's the developer who proposes the project. It's not the city.
Okay, very good. And Julie, you have 90 seconds for the same question.
I'd like to start with saying the whole point of Prop A is so that we define the project. These R30 housing projects are being mandated by the state of California, so they fall under different rules. I'm sure you guys all know that, because Dan's did such a brilliant job of educating all of us, myself included, Dan. If we had Prop A, we would be defining the project. We would be defining the zoning, and we would be defining the height. That was taken away from us. So we no longer have that. You should also know what was written in the San Diego Union Tribune. I think it was last week, maybe 10 days ago. You can Google it with Embarcadero Institute. The Embarcadero Institute found, and the union wrote about, that the state of California inadvertently doubled its RENA requirements, which means every city, we're not the only ones dealing with this. There's a lot of cities that are in trouble right now. Every city took double what they needed to take. So there's a lot of room to figure all this out. And last thing, were I mayor when this housing element was passed, or it never was passed, and I never would have, anyways, Goodson would have had a much higher requirement, like 30 or 40% anyways. I'm done. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. So I just wanted to note with a little bit of pride that the question that came out of the audience wasn't how can we have fewer affordable units in Olevenheim? It was the opposite. And I think that makes a real point about the character of Olevenheim. Rural doesn't mean rich. Rural doesn't mean NIMBY. Rural is a lifestyle. And when the Desert Rose project, the horse property that was there before the density bonus project that I think predated, Catherine, your involvement. But when that came up, there were two caretaker families that were living on the property. Very low, extremely low income, probably, by RENA definitions. They were displaced for basically a Carmel Valley-like subdivision, wall to wall, $1.5 million to $2.5 million homes, where you could pass a stick of butter from bathroom window to bathroom window, where there's no yard. And what did we get from that in terms of affordable housing? We got one deed restricted, 80% median family income unit. And so when you talk about diversity and inclusion, I think it's important for us to understand that, you know, the rural community is a diverse community in its own way. And the people that live here are important to all of us. And gentrifying our community is a threat to our community. And so I just wanted to make that last point for the folks of Olevenheim, because I think that maybe gets mixed a little bit when we hear some of the citywide messaging about this is the only project we're asking in Olevenheim. With that, we'll conclude the question and answer part of the candidates forum. And we give you guys each 2 minutes to make concluding statements. And I think the concluding remarks, we said, Catherine, you'll go first with 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you. So I'm running for re-election as Encinitas mayor to continue our great successes. During my time, we've really been on a roll here in the city of Encinitas with our community improvements, our prioritizing of public health, which we didn't get a chance to talk about, but is really important. And we are a safe and a financially stable city. So we are a really positive place to live. And I hear that from people all the time, that they love living in Encinitas. And I am committed to preserving and enhancing that. What you see from my opponent is only negativity, complaint, conspiracy theories, and gripes. And there is nothing positive that she is offering the city. I want to call to your attention the fact that she did not answer the question about who she would support for president, saying she doesn't want politics in this race. But then later, this is a quote, "My job is to run a campaign so we can switch the politics of this city." Switch the politics of this city. Everybody who is on the city council has been elected into those seats. This is not some fiefdom that I control. They were elected. So the people have decided who represents you in Olevenheim. It's Joe Mosca. Jody Hubbard represents Cardiff. She defeated an incumbent. These are people, Tony Kranz has been on the council a long time. We are all serving in these roles because of what we offer to the community. And I am proud of our ability to work toward consensus. We are not a council that's driven by personalities or by political theater. We are a council that is trying to get things done. And if you look at my track record, I have gotten a lot done, a lot of community improvements, while maintaining us as a safe and well-run city. I would like to continue that work. It is tremendously important, and it is my great honor to have been chosen to represent you in the city of Encinitas for the last 4 years as mayor. And I hope that tonight, the difference between the candidates and my platform and her platform make the choice clear. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Julie, you have 2 minutes to conclude.
Thank you. As you all now know, the city has paved a pathway for the Goodson project to swell up to nearly twice its intended size. My opponent should have never offered this site up, and the state of California should have never allowed it into our housing plan. There is no way our city leaders didn't know what this would become. Even more devastating is what has been done to the voters of Encinitas. My opponent has reversed our vote twice. First, by submitting Measure U housing plan after we rejected it. And second, by reversing our Prop A vote. Lastly, she sued you and me to permanently remove Prop A. Don't believe any of that stuff. If you're curious about the Prop A lawsuit, ask Bruce Ehlers, your neighbor and the head of the Planning Commission. I will defend your community character and home values. I will protect Prop A, our right to vote on zoning. I will speak up for people who need an affordable place to live. We can do all this without ruining Encinitas. We can demand the developers set aside a higher percentage of their projects for lower income housing. My opponent refuses to do that. Is this why 9 developers have dumped money into her campaign? 2 of them contributed nearly $20,000 to a political action committee solely to re-elect her. What do they expect in return? Also, 3 of the developers benefited from Measure U. And folks, there's more than housing at stake here. A recent Sandag report shows violent crime in Encinitas is up 58%. Does that statistic reflect a mayor who cares about public safety? This is why the Deputy Sheriff's Association has endorsed me. So have numerous former mayors, commissioners, taxpayer advocates, public safety officials, and other community leaders from both sides of the aisle. The far left, the far right, the little left, the little right, and right down the middle. They're all endorsing me. I envision an Encinitas that places public safety and neighborhood preservation ahead of other considerations. And I will always fight local control of our land decisions. I will always fight for local control. If that's mythical thinking, it's a myth I can turn into reality. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. All right. With that, I would like to thank the candidates. You guys have done an admirable job of staying on point and on time. I really appreciate that. You've done a fairly admirable job of not speaking for each other. I also appreciate that. I want to thank the audience who's participated in this. And this will conclude the formal portion of our forum. After this, we will keep the Zoom call open for another approximately 30 minutes. One of the important things in trying to build in some of the look and feel of our traditional in-person forum was a sort of a milling around period after the forum. And so what we'll do after the conclusion of the recordings is to turn the mic over to the audience and give them a comment period and allow the candidates an opportunity to jump into the chat room if they want to and say a few words. And with that, maybe have a little bit more of an informal showing. Before we do that, Jennifer, could you unmute everybody? And we'll ask the audience to give a round of applause to the candidates for their courage and candidness in participating this evening, and everyone for a well-run forum. Hopefully this was very informative and illuminating into the differences of the 2 candidates. So thank you, everybody.
I'm looking for it. Where'd it go? Sorry.
Unmute all is failing us.
I'm trying. I don't know where it went. Oh gosh. Can't find the button.
Sorry, I don't have that button.
Okay, I've asked everybody to unmute themselves. You're welcome to unmute yourselves and give a round of applause if you'd like.
Just participants. Sorry.
Thank you to both of the candidates. We really appreciate the time and the candidness that you've given us all. Mike, would you please cut off the recording and the live streaming?
Will do.